Could you start off by introducing yourself?
Yes, my name is Suzette Garcia Davis.
And I'm Andrew Davis. I'll be asking the interview questions today. And our topic for this interview is yoga. So for the first question, when you were a kid, did you have any idea that you would become a yoga instructor? And additionally, did you have a concept of what yoga was?
I don't remember ever aspiring to be a yoga instructor when I was a kid. I don't think I was familiar with that even being a possibility or a profession. And so it wasn't something that was in part of my childhood. I do, as an adult, I just have a memory of my dad practicing yoga poses in our living room and him trying to show me how to balance on one leg. But at the time, I just thought he was being silly, and I didn't connect it until much later.
What about as you got older? Was teaching yoga something you ever started to consider? And what was another early encounter with yoga in your life?
As I got older, I don't remember it even being part of my world. I was always on team sports and considered myself athletic, and it wasn't something that resonated with me, I guess, at the time. I think I was aware of it, but it seemed like it wasn't, I just didn't see myself reflected in the people that were doing yoga, or just the small, what I saw on TV or in advertisements. So, and I actually didn't really know what it was other than people in yoga pants stretching and having yoga mats and stuff like that. So I guess it just didn't capture my imagination, and it didn't seem like something that would benefit me at the time.
Do you think had you started practicing yoga earlier in your life, it would have been helpful to you and changed anything? For example, with raising 4 boys by yourself, do you find yourself wishing past you could benefit from current use yoga knowledge?
That's a really interesting question, because the reason that I have even pursued yoga recently was because I would say like 4 or 5 years ago, I went to a yoga grief workshop, and it was probably the first yoga-centric thing that I had ever participated in. I'd done therapy and meditation and all kinds of alternative, holistic models, I guess, just to be able to deal with the trauma of losing a spouse and just being a single mom. And so I went to this yoga grief workshop, not really expecting anything, but it was something that I hadn't tried. And so it was the first time. So my husband passed away in 2004. So it was the first time in about, at the time, 10, 11 years that I felt able to process my grief. And so even after having tried counseling and praying and, all kinds of different, whatever, all the things that you try to be able to kind of integrate that experience. And so it was just really powerful going to that grief workshop and just being able to process my grief without having to talk about what happened or revisit it, but just allowing my body to kind of feel what it felt, and then just have the tools to release it through breath and movement. And so that really, really had an impact on me, and it left me just really, it was so instantly effective for me that it just left me wanting to learn more about it.
Are there people that you know who you think should look into yoga but probably never will?
Unfortunately, I feel like yoga can seem pretty exclusive, especially to minorities and people who have social economic challenges, and even just single moms. Like, just, it seems like, you know, I think it's presented like as another self-care luxury amenity versus a really practical tool that gives you the opportunity to really connect with yourself and resource yourself. I think for me, it has been valuable to be able to just mother better and be a better provider and caretaker, and just be able to do the other jobs that I tend to take on. Prior to being a yoga teacher, that's pretty new. I was doing doula work and birth work, and also I was teaching in a public school, and all those roles are very taxing, and they're very giving and nurturing roles. And so yoga just provided a space for me to take care of myself first, so that I could be sourced enough to be able to give to others. So one of my intentions going into the future is to be able to reach out to minorities and women who are domestic violence survivors, and just be able to make it affordable and accessible, and just something that they can incorporate into their daily lives, just as another tool to be better able to take care for themselves and others.
All right, the next question is, what is yoga?
So yoga is the Sanskrit word that means yog or union, and it comes from traditional practices in India. And the way that I was taught the meaning of yoga was to think about it as a way to connect to source, so whether that is God or the universe or nature, whatever is your personal source. Yoga uses practices such as breath, meditation, and the physical postures, which is what most people are familiar with, the asana, to kind of create the structure and the conditions to be able to reach samadhi, which is what some people are familiar with as enlightenment or just your higher being. And the other part that yoga entails is there's actually a moral code incorporated in the teachings, like the Yoga Sutras. And so those are all pretty universal principles of how to become a human, a better human, and because we're all already humans, but just a better human being, and how to interact with others, and how just principles to guide your life and your path. And so personally, yoga to me is helping me to come home to myself and to remember who I really am under any circumstance. Our lives and our circumstances will fluctuate and change, but ultimately we are who we are. And so yoga has helped me to really connect to that principle, and to really be able to come back and ground, and just really be able to kind of navigate all the changes and all the my life experiences, and just really become more aware of.
How is yoga different from stretching or other kinds of fitness?
So in my experience, there are yoga classes whose emphasis is on stretching, what we think of as stretching, but that's not the whole of it. There are practices that encourage you to connect to your breath. There are meditation practices. There are practices that are about stillness and rest. And so when we think about yoga and the for example, hatha yoga, which is more about the postures and the asanas, and so the intention behind that is to have some stretching. But traditionally, the way that it was explained to me was that wasn't the end goal of yoga. You kind of use that as a discipline and a practice to reach stillness. And so once you reach stillness, you can enter a state of meditation and kind of inner reflection. And so so in that way, I feel like it's different than just going to like a calisthenics or aerobics class, is that the intention behind it has a little bit more substance. But that being said, there are also pretty popular yoga classes where the intention is to, break a sweat and get a good workout. And so it encompasses a lot of different purposes.
Right. So you talked a little bit about how yoga has been helpful in overcoming some of your own personal traumas and grief. But what are some of the additional health benefits of practicing it?
So there are a lot of scientific studies. I'm actually reading a book right now. It's called The Science of Yoga. And so there have been studies that show that it's great to help alleviate any depression and anxiety. One of the branches, or kind of a sister science, is Ayurveda. And so in Ayurvedic practices, people are actually, this is a different certification, so people study this and are certified in working with people. So it's not something that, so it's kind of, in India, it's a form of kind of like a holistic doctor would be here. So in India, they have Ayurvedic practitioners, and so they're able to meet with you and just kind of get your history and your medical history, and then they're able to prescribe different ways of nutritional recommendations, and also yoga practices, the physical asanas. They would prescribe different sequences that would help with whatever ailment you're dealing with, whether it be a physical ailment or an emotional ailment. The grief workshop worked a lot with the heart chakra. So it's called subtle anatomy. So they, in the yogic tradition, it's believed that our whole body is connected, but we also have chakras, so different parts of our body. So the heart chakra was the main part that was addressed in the grief workshop. So then they would prescribe sequences of exercises that mainly deal with that part of your body and help release the emotions. So the movement helps to facilitate an emotional release. And so that's part of the belief. And
so you've already talked about how yoga's helped with grief and trauma, but what are some of the other benefits of practicing it?
So there are a lot of actual scientific studies done on the benefits of yoga and its ability to help people with their overall health and wellness, specifically depression, anxiety, insomnia, stress. One of the things that we learned in our teacher training, just briefly, is that yoga has an actual sister branch called Ayurveda. And so in that system, there are recommendations for how you should eat and the kinds of yoga asanas that you would be beneficial for your body based on your body type and your emotional and temperamental composition. So there is a branch also that's specifically called yoga therapy. And so teachers, and it's kind of an accelerated training. And so teachers that are yoga therapy certified are able to work with more in depth and be more prescriptive in the yoga sequences and how they work with people one-on-one. I know that I have friends that are veterans and have PTSD, and so having a regular yoga practice, working with a yoga therapist has been really beneficial for them, and just helping to alleviate that, and helping to get them kind of having a tool to be able to function in their lives. So there's really a lot of information on that, and I think the main thing is just allowing you to be as sourced as you can.
Are there people that should not do yoga? For example, non-flexible, overweight, religious, carnivorous, or any other type?
So a lot of information that I feel is out there really focuses on one type of yoga students, but I believe that yoga is accessible to everyone as long as you can breathe. Then you can do yoga. One of the most powerful yoga books I've read, and I'll have Andrew post it on the resources because I can't remember the title right now, but it was about a man who became paralyzed from his waist down, and he just really spoke up to the experience of using yoga and breath exercises and mindfulness and meditation to be able to feel his whole body. And so I think that's really powerful, that just a really powerful picture of what yoga can offer to everyone, no matter what their body looks like or their level of flexibility. And that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is just showing up. And so, in fact, even when you're an experienced yoga student and yoga practitioner, it'll vary day to day what your body will be doing. So even if you were able to get into a perfect tree pose yesterday, today might just be, your tree pose might be a little wobbly, and that's okay. And that's part of doing yoga, it's being okay with those fluctuations, but still being able to ground and connect to the moment and to stay present into what's actually going on.
So you mentioned that, in your opinion, yoga is for anyone that's breathing. So does that include to non-humans?
Yes. It's really popular right now to have goat yoga and puppy yoga. And if you happen to have pets, I think it's amazing to really spend time observing them and know that they just naturally, straight out of bed, will do a downward dog and and stretch, and they can. It's amazing how they can regulate themselves with their breathing, and so I believe that it's just an innate thing for some animals to be able to practice.
So you mentioned previously that grief workshop a few years ago, but in the recent years, what has caused you to become more interested in yoga and pushed you towards becoming an instructor?
So I had a bout of adrenal fatigue, and I was trying just different modalities to help deal with it, and just anything from chiropractors to massages to praying to sleeping all day. And so I just was looking for just a holistic way to be able to heal and also give me some hope. I was feeling pretty desperate at the time, just with just feeling exhausted and just maxed out, and then also having the responsibility to be a mom, and there were some challenging things going on too at home. And so I just kind of started going to a class as a last resort, and I made a commitment to it was, you know, I started going once a week for an hour at lunchtime, because that was the only time that I thought I kind of like deserved to myself. And so so I made a commitment to just go to that class. And it just felt, at first when I started going, it felt weird and silly to go. And I used to joke with my friends, I was like, I'm basically paying somebody to just like tuck me in so I can take a nap for an hour. And that's what it felt like. And I didn't love it at first, but I just kind of went, because I just had made a commitment to myself to keep going. And thankfully, the consistency of going, and I think that's probably the only reason why I broke through and was able to really connect with my practice, was because I was consistent without knowing that that's what I was building. So I was building consistency. I started going, I went from once a week to going twice a week, and I just started feeling better. And it wasn't an overnight thing. I think it took about 2 or 3 months before I just was like seeing the value of it. Still probably at 3 months I stopped going, and then I missed it. And that's why I was able to see that I was making a difference. And then I just started going back, and immediately I felt like I had more energy, more patience with you and your brothers, more patience with myself. And I was able to just have more clarity of thought, and then just be able to make better choices for my health. So it just kind of snowballed into a really good thing, and it really inspired me to learn more about it. And when I started teacher training, I wasn't intending, my end goal wasn't to be a teacher. I started it, so it just became kind of like expanding the commitment to myself. And it was something that I the intention behind it was to have something that could just be mine. And so that's kind of how I signed up for the training, with no expectation that I would teach, but knowing that I wanted to learn more about it, and that I wanted to be surrounded by a community of women who were also interested in learning. And so after I finished my training, then it was a slow process to even figure out if I wanted to offer that myself as a teacher. But that wasn't, the main draw was definitely that I had seen how effective it was with dealing with grief. And then I experienced how valuable a tool it was for helping to mitigate the adrenal fatigue.
Well, nice. It sounds really positive in those areas, for sure. For the next question, do you have to go to a class in order to learn yoga? Or can you learn yoga online or through books?
Well, especially right now, there are so many wonderful yoga classes available online. And there are so many books published that it is available to anyone right now. You know, there are a lot of books at the public library. Yoga Alliance has a lot of free classes and resources and workshops. So I would say it's pretty easy at the moment, and a lot of the yoga studios are closed right now. So a lot of the local yoga studios are putting a lot of resources and classes up online. So I think it's a great time to teach yourself. But also, it's also always a good idea, because it can be a physical practice, and there are some risks. So just make sure that you are aware what your physical abilities and limitations are. If you have any kind of pre-existing condition, just consult with somebody in person, or give the yoga studio a call and kind of a lot of them have waivers and kind of have a list of things that you should kind of be aware of, especially if you're pregnant. There's different situations where you would not want to participate in something that's physically strenuous, so just be aware of that. But other than that, it's a pretty good way to start, is to either watch a video that's taught by a certified teacher, or to read a book about it, and just most of them have step-by-step pictures of what things should look like and feel like.
What training have you undergone in order to become an instructor? Is that a typical program within the yoga community?
So I was trained at the Root Center for Yoga and Sacred Studies here in Colorado Springs. And it is a 200-hour training program, and it was over the span of 9 months. It's actually a little bit longer than the typical training programs. You can find some that are 2 or 3 weeks, or also there are some that are online. This was an in-person training program, and it includes an apprenticeship. And then also I was able to be mentored by my restorative yoga teacher. So in addition to the 200 hours, I also took part in a 12-week training program with my restorative yoga teacher. So yeah, there are a lot of different programs out there, and it, the emphasis and the style of the program can be really specific and honed into your interests. So there are Kundalini training programs, and Hatha yoga, and Iyengar, which are pretty specific types of yoga practices. My program was a lot broader, and it emphasized more on the different components of yoga, so that we could bring those principles into whatever style we chose. And so, but my specific area of that I teach is called restorative yoga.
Could you explain a little bit more about your specific style and how it's different from some of the other styles of yoga?
Sure. So restorative yoga is meant to bring your body into a state of deep relaxation and rest. And so the way that my classes are set up are I provide you with a space that's quiet and dark and still and warm, and then guide you through 3 or 4 restorative postures, which are modified asanas, and they involve a lot of props. So I used a lot of bolsters and blankets and blocks, and this is optional, but it's recommended that you wear an eye covering during the practice. So restorative is different from a lot of the more active. So the restorative practice is not about stretching, and it's not about physical exertion. It's more about getting still, and some people like to call it kind of like the precursor to meditation, because you're kind of winding down and getting into that place of internal introspection. So when we look at restorative and we compare it to something like Hatha yoga or even forest yoga, all those practices are a lot more active. And so the emphasis on that is on stretching and just a lot more movement based. And they all serve different purposes as far as like the type of energy that you are trying to move through your body and create. And also, as they have a lot of different intentions as far as like when you're doing a more active yoga practice, you're kind of stirring things up and just kind of letting your body work through it in that mode of like just stirring things up and like observing it, versus when you're doing restorative, it's more of like you're just drawing in and seeing what's already there. And so even though most active, physically active yoga practices have a shavasana, which is where you're just resting, that's like maybe 5 minutes at the end of your active yoga practice. Restorative is fully a restful practice. So from beginning to end, it's like having shavasana for that long, for like the hour and 15 minutes versus just a 5-minute increment at the end.
Then that brings me to the next question, which might be one of the most important ones. Do you have to wear yoga pants? What other things should beginners consider as they begin to learn more about yoga? Do I need a mat? Should I do yoga right after eating?
So I rarely wear yoga pants. I prefer to practice in sweatpants. So just whatever you feel the most comfortable in and that you already have in your closet. You don't need to. I mean, yoga pants are cute, so why not? But just don't feel like you need to go out and buy some yoga pants. One of the only practical reason I see for yoga pants is that if you're doing an inversion where you're kind of upside down and the pant leg will roll down. But if that doesn't annoy you, I've seen people, wear sweatpants, lounge, pajama pants, shorts. It's really, whatever you're comfortable with. It'd be great to have a mat if you're doing a physically active practice, just because the mat creates kind of a barrier between you and the floor, and it also helps to make it so you're not slipping while you're holding your postures. But you can easily use a blanket. With restorative, a mat is a prop that we use, but it can be replaced by a blanket or a rug, a throw, couch throw. And in fact, as we're doing our classes, online classes, we're trying to do it-yourself yoga. So we're encouraging people to just find what they have at home, like couch cushions, pillows, throw pillows, blankets, towels, hand towels. So it's not necessarily, there's not necessarily a need to go out and buy a bunch of stuff to begin. And, especially if you're doing something simple like meditation, where you're just really just sitting, you can sit on the floor, you can sit in a chair, you can sit on, as long as your spine is straight, that's a good starting a beginner position for any practice. In fact, I have, my grandmother is in her 80s, and I just went out to visit her, and she asked me to walk her through some postures. And so one of the things that I suggested for her specifically, and I have a friend that teaches this, is called chair yoga, which it's really beneficial for people that have mobility issues, and it just makes the postures really accessible. And everybody has a chair at home, hopefully. So it's not there's no need to feel like you can't do it or that you need to have fancy stuff to do it.
Right. Well, that sets up our next question really well. How has the recent pandemic impacted your ability to teach and attend yoga classes? And what has the response been from your studio?
So the pandemic has posed a challenge for me. I started probably in late January, early February. I started an LLC with the intention of doing a lot more community outreach to people that are underserved by the yoga community. So that has been put on hold right now. And then a couple of weeks into March, our yoga studio closed down, and I had previously been teaching 1 class a week and then attending my own classes. So that was really, disappointing in a way, because it kind of just put a big pause button on a lot of personal goals, and then and just my own practice. So probably the 3rd or 4th week in March, the studio started doing online classes and videos, and so that has been great just to help to keep the community connected. And I think they're back up with a class, at least 1 class every day of the week. And that's available through rootdownandgrow.com, I believe is the name of the website. And you can just sign up for classes and you'll get a link, and it's a Zoom link, so you can do a Zoom class, and it's live. Most of the classes are live at the moment. In the future, they're going to start recording classes, and that's how I'll probably be involved, is recording classes, and then you can just buy a package and watch it whenever you have time. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, I think that's the last of our questions. One final thing. So, given the pandemic and everybody spending a lot more time at home, is there a simple yoga pose or position that you could demonstrate for us?
Okay, so we're just going to do a simple shavasana with your legs supported, and you'll need a scarf to cover your eyes, or if you have an eye mask, you can use an eye mask. A pillow for your head, a chair, a blanket to prop up your legs, but also to soften any edges, and then a blanket to cover up. So you're gonna lay on your mat, and you're gonna scoot up as close to the chair as you can, and then you're gonna swing your legs up. And you're gonna make sure your head and your neck are supported. And then you can use your eye covering. I guess I should do my blanket first. You can, as best you can. You're gonna cover your feet and your legs and your body. And then you can cover your eyes. And your hands, your arms and your hands can be to your side, or they can be on your belly, or they can just be under the blanket, whatever feels most comfortable. And then you take 3 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. And then you just settle in. You can set an alarm and decide how much time you want to spend, but usually the recommended amount is 20 minutes. So you can set your alarm for 20 minutes and just breathe normally and try to relax. So after you've been in the pose for whatever amount of time you've decided, 5, 10, 15, or 20 minutes, you'll want to come out of the pose safely. So you'll begin by lengthening your breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. You want to start to move your fingers, your toes. And you'll slowly draw one knee to your chest and let the other one follow. And here you'll want to hug your knees to your chest, roll back and forth on your back, and take any movement that feels good. And when you're ready, you can roll over to your left side and pause. Just take another couple of breaths here. And then you want to slowly use your hands and arms to lift yourself back up to a comfortable seated position.